Nintendo's recent Nintendo Direct unleashed a flood of new trailers, and among them was another for Mario Kart 8, and it didn't disappoint, showing off new characters, more courses, and an insane amount of detail. So you know what that means, it's time to start up the old analysis machine and see what secrets it might be hiding. But as always, please make sure to check out our previous analysis videos if you haven't already, as we'll only be covering the new stuff here. You'll find links to them in the description below. And with that, let's get started. So the new trailer shows off 8 previously unconfirmed racetracks, 4 of which are entirely new, and 4 of which are returning from past games. And while it shows off a fair amount of each of the courses, the scenes are completely out of order. So we're going to do like we did last time and rearrange the scenes for each level into the proper chronological order, for a better idea of how each course will actually play. So the first racetrack shown off appears to take place after dark in a city with one heck of a bustling nightlife. And we base this on the fact that the entire course appears to be themed as if it were a giant nightclub. Hell, even the course's intro features an equalizer laid over it. But besides being home to an epileptic seizure sufferer's worst nightmare, it's also filled to the brim with details, which we'll point out as we go through the course starting line and finish line. So from the starting line, we can see that you'll immediately be launched into a brief flying section. But in order to see what lies ahead, you'll actually have to take a look at the last clip in the trailer, which reveals that you'll land shortly thereafter, and follow a track that bends slightly to the right before curving to the left. Now before we move on, there's a ton of details to point out here, like the giant rotating disco ball on the right here with the words Mario Kart written on it, as well as a crowd of people rocking out on the left. Both of which we get a better look at in the trailer's opening scene that offers a preview of the level. So here's that disco ball again, and there's the crowd, which we can see is made up of Piranha Plants, Shy Guys, and even Koopa Troopas, the latter 2 of which we can also see on the Jumbotron. And on it, we can also see the DJ rocking out behind his booth. And if you look really close, it appears that he has a ponytail, so we really have no clue who this mystery man or woman really is. Now above the TV, we can see a sign featuring Larry Koopa's mug, and the words Larry Lights. Could this be the name of the level, or is it just some smart marketing by Larry's company? At any rate, it does suggest that it actually could be Larry's level. Although, if we take a look at the right over here, we can see another sign, but this one features a face of Roy Koopa wearing a pair of headphones, and it even has his name written just below. So maybe this level is a partnership between the two, or maybe involves all the Koopalings. Now between those two signs is a barely visible ad for something called MKTV, featuring Lakitu, but more on that later. Alright, and that's all the details for right now. So at some point after going around the bend here, you'll find yourself curving to the left slightly as you descend a shallow staircase that runs parallel to an anti-gravity section, as shown by the racers traveling along the wall here. And did you catch the cool trail they leave behind? It seems to be specific to only this surface. Now another thing that we can see that will appear on that surface are these star-shaped obstacles, which causes poor Toad to spin out when he hits one. And speaking of stars, did you catch the star pattern found in some of the floor tiles? Now unfortunately, we don't see exactly how you'll get to the anti-gravity section, but there can't be that much to it, since we're guessing Mario's not that far behind the other racers. Now this next clip shows what it's actually like to be on that wall. And as you can see, the track eventually splits into 2 colors, green and pink, which signifies an upcoming fork in the road. But before we get to that, did you notice the banners in the background that not only display a star, but even say Star Cup on them? Yep, that probably means this track's taking place in the Star Cup, alongside Sunshine Airport as revealed in the previous trailer. Now this next clip gives us a better look at the entire area, including the path that splits right here, but more on that in a second. For now, keep a close eye on the light green part of the track. There's actually a projection there that says MKTV, which we can tell is short for Mario Kart TV based on the sign that appears a few seconds later. Now Mario Kart TV is actually a feature announced back during E3 that allow you to watch other people's races online, but more on that later. For now, if you go back and zoom in on those light colored squares, we can see a projected image of Lakitu eventually drops in, complete with his fishing hook. So it's starting to seem like Lakitu is either the network's mascot, or perhaps the one running it all. And it could also mean that the city just might be home to MKTV's headquarters. Okay, now back to that splitting track, as both soon lead to a set of item boxes. You may have also noticed that the look of both tracks changed drastically and now consist of colored lines. Oh, and a quick side note, we can see that the star-shaped obstacles that we pointed out before appear yet again, but this time we can see that they actually float slightly above the track. But hold on, let's rewind the footage for a second, as we can see that we actually passed another disco ball too. Or so we thought at first, but as it turns out, that's actually the same disco ball that we pointed out at the very start of the course, and here's why. If we go back to the starting line scene and freeze it here, we can see the green path actually runs right underneath the starting line. In addition, though it's hard to see, we can actually see the bottom side of the pink path obscuring the green one as Mario descends here. It just goes to show how closely layered these tracks can be now thanks to the anti-gravity mechanic. Okay, now there's a bit of a gap before this next scene, which shows Ludwig curving around on that same pink path as before, except this portion's lined with sparklers. And if you look real close, we can see what appears to be the side of the green path just behind it. And we know they're the same paths based on this next scene where we can see Bowser taking to the air. And if we look behind him, we can see he just took off from either that same pink or green path from before. And in case there's still doubt, if we look at the opening cutscene again, we can see the 2 ramps Bowser leapt from, with the 2 split paths in the background leading right up to them, complete with the same diamond pattern on the track that we can see in Ludwig's clip. So with that taken care of, let's get back to Bowser's scene. Now, did you notice the projection of the star in the landing zone? And if you move forward a few frames, you can see some more people hanging out on the sideline, and some question blocks on the walls just behind them, and there even appears to be a stepladder waterfall right beneath them. Interesting. Now, if we back up to the start of the clip, we can actually see what lies ahead, which is a slight drop off before the track bends to the left. And did you spot the piranha plant hanging out right by the trackside? Well, he's the same one that can be found in this final scene, right here, which shows that the finish line is right around that final bend. And cementing that fact is these are the only two scenes where confetti is floating around, suggesting the party is happening right at the finish line. It also appears that you may be able to take a shortcut by cutting in on the inside of that piranha plant, but be careful as he'll probably attack if you get too close. Woo, and that covers it for the general layout of the course, but there are still a few final details I wanted to point out. Now, you've probably noticed the speakers near the starting line that pounded the music, but did you notice the decorative stars do too? And those stars appear to actually be based on the designs of the launch stars from Super Mario Galaxy. Now, you also probably noticed the various lighting rigs throughout the course, such as the one located just behind the starting line. But if we go back to the anti-gravity section, did you notice the large spinning one in the background? And not only is it spinning, but it's actually moving around too. Okay, and that's finally enough about Larry Lights, or whatever this level may actually be called. So let's motor on over to the next track shown off. This one takes place on the cliff face as you'll race up and down waterfalls. And the entire mountainside is lined with Shy Guys toiling away. Wait a second, Shy Guys? Waterfalls? Where have we heard that before? Oh right, we actually saw a location called Shy Guy Falls on the signboard in Sunshine Airport, as we pointed out in our last analysis, which we're pretty confident is this track's actual name. So let's go ahead and reassemble the assorted clips to try and make sense of it all. Now, unfortunately, this is the only one of the new tracks where we can't actually see the starting line at all, which means we don't know exactly where this race starts. But we think we have some idea based on where it won't start. So every single scene in the trailer, besides this flying section, takes place on the anti-gravity section. And since no racetrack shown off so far started on one, we think that's safe to say that's the case here too. Particularly as we can see a large chunk of the course in this scene with no starting line in sight, which means the race starts nowhere near the falls. However, this Bowser clip does lead into a flying section, and if we back up the footage, we can actually get a glimpse of what lies ahead, which is a landing area far below with a track that bends to the left. Now, if you move forward a few frames, we can see that the bending path below seems as if it will eventually lead to this wooden bridge in the distant background, which continues onto a wooden pathway. So since all of that's clearly a non-anti-gravity section, we think the starting line could appear anywhere from this section until the anti-gravity one. But unfortunately, there's no footage of what that may actually look like, but this next clip may offer a clue, as we do get to see where the anti-gravity section actually starts, as indicated by the blue anti-gravity strip here, which means that everything that came before it wasn't anti-gravity, which basically confirms that the bridge we pointed out just before eventually leads to this point. And since we can see that the path is curving downward, it would seem that the path on the bridge eventually climbs an elevation and either winds around or perhaps even through the mountain, until it reaches this point where you then descend. Also, did you notice the butterflies flying around in the background? It's a nice touch. Now before we move on, pay attention to the track design here with the dirt road and grass covered borders, as it perfectly matches this next clip, confirming they're connected. Now at first glance, it appears that the track leads to a jump over a river. But remember, this is an anti-gravity section. We're actually completely sideways here, and what you're really jumping over is a base of the leftmost waterfall, as we can better see if we freeze a Bowser clip right here. So see that gap in the track? Yep, it's the same one, meaning you'll be jumping it from the left to the other half on the right. So if we go back to the Iggy clip, we can see that after the jump, the course curves to the left. And if we go back to the Bowser one, we can see why. It actually leads right up the rightmost waterfall, where you'll encounter speed pads that follow with the water, which is something we've never seen in a Mario Kart game before. And we actually get to see it all in motion with this next clip. See, there's a track below, and we can see that you'll actually jump from it to the waterfall. Now let's go back to this Bowser scene again, which is proven to be ever so helpful. And we can see that the waterfall on the right eventually leads to a wooden walkway, which wraps around to the left waterfall, which you'll then descend. And we get a close-up look at all of this in the next two scenes. But it's not long before the waterfall path terminates with a ramp that leads into the flying section that we started off with, which again leads to the landing area far below. Yep, so that's Shy Guy Falls' general track layout, but there's still quite a few details that we haven't yet pointed out. Okay, so we already mentioned that a bunch of Shy Guys can be seen working on the mountain face, but let's take a closer look at what exactly they're doing. See the red one over here? He appears to be using a pickaxe to mine some crystals in the wall. And if we look just above him, we can see another Shy Guy using a rope to hoist up some of those very same crystals, who we get a better look at in this scene. Now here's the really cool thing. This was all hinted at back in the original E3 trailer, where we pointed out a sign in the village level that advertised a business called Shy Guy Metals, complete with a Shy Guy wielding a pickaxe. Pretty awesome, right? It's just yet another way in how all these Mario Kart 8 courses are connected. But Shy Guys aren't the only characters visible here, as we can just barely see several piranha plants in the area too, such as this guy right here. Finally, did you spot some of the bird nests containing eggs? They seem awfully similar to the bird's nests we first saw in Thwomp Ruins. Could they be in a similar region? Okay, that's quite enough about Shy Guy Falls. Next up is an amusement park that quite clearly goes by the name of Sub Coaster, at least if the giant sign is any indication. So let's again work our magic and try to reorder the scenes so that they make sense. and is actually the level's last scene that reveals a starting line, which you can see right there. And you see that giant building ahead? Although we can't make it out in the trailer, if we take a look at this screenshot, we can see that the track leads from the starting line straight into that building for a short jaunt before emerging out the right side, which we get a glimpse at in this scene, which shows a 90-degree turn that takes place inside the building before leading right back outside. Now before we move on, there's a ton of cool details to point out here, such as the fact that this room actually appears to be a museum of sorts, as indicated by the roped-off submarine in the background here. In fact, there's even a sign on the wall just ahead that reads, "The Submarine Through History." And speaking of signs, if you zoom in on the one in the far back here, we can see that it appears to show a picture of Mario. And who's that next to him? Why, that looks awfully similar to the Goombas, who was last seen in Mario Kart DS nearly 10 years ago. And we're not done yet, as there's still one more sign that's a little more mysterious. This one says, "The Mecha Cheap," a structural study. And then it shows a couple images of what appears to be a mechanical Cheap. Weird. And of course there's a Toad here, as well as a Noki, of which can be found all over the course. Okay, that covers it for the tunnel, so let's follow the racers outside as the track bends slightly to the right. And if we go back to that picture from before, we can see it leads right to an anti-gravity area, as indicated by the strip here. And it then immediately splits into two paths, which I get a better look at in this scene, with the one on the left being quite a bit higher than the one Waluigi takes. Now oddly, we're not really sure why the path splits in two, because they both seem to lead to the exact same area, an underwater section. Although we can see that Toad, who took the higher path, flies by Waluigi here, so maybe the left one's a better choice. Also, did you notice that they pass a submarine as they fly by? And we can see another climbing the track in the background. So it seems these may actually be some kind of moving obstacle. Now before we move on, make note of the pipes in the background here, as we can see them in this next clip, confirming this underwater section is what comes next. And it's here that we get our first actual look at the mechanical Cheeps hinted at in the museum just moments before. And check it out, you can see that they're really just giant wind-up toys based on the crank on their back. But are they just for show, or will they be actual obstacles? Now we can see that it's not long before the track leads back above water into a tall vertical curve as shown in this scene. And it's this scene that also gives us our first good look at the submarines that travel the course, which follow a track that runs down the exact middle of the roadway. And clearly, they take up quite a bit of room, which means they'll probably be a pretty big obstacle to get around. And given that their front is relatively flat, it may actually bring you to a complete standstill, and perhaps even push you back further down the track. Up ahead, you'll find a set of iron boxes at the peak of the curve, before working your way back down the other side. Now to see what happens next, we'll have to revisit this Waluigi scene. Okay, so there's a start to the tall vertical curve, and if we follow it around, we can see it drops into another body of water on the other side of the wall. And we can actually just barely see that section of track in the background of this next underwater scene. Now there are a couple of things to point out here. First, we can see that the anti-gravity section is over, and on top of that, there's no track for the submarines here, meaning they won't be getting in your way in this section. In addition, while the main path curves around the seashells here, it seems that Sneak Iggy found a shortcut by barreling right between them. Now speaking of those seashells, we think they may actually be part of a ride. If we take a look at this screenshot from the same area, we can see that it not only has a circus tent-like top, but it even has a title too. Now although part of it is cut off, we're pretty sure that says shell, which makes sense given the seashells. So what's the deal? Is this really an underwater ride? Or did this park become flooded at some point? It might explain why there appears to be walkways underwater, complete with fake seaweed. Now there's a bit of a gap before this next scene that shows Luigi following a section of track that leads into a flying section back above water. Now from here, it's pretty much a straight shot to the finish line, except for the ticket booth here that you'll either have to fly over or weave around to either side. And look, it's even manned by a Noki and Toad. Alright, and that covers it for this course's layout. But you know the drill, there's still some more details for us to cover. Like the fact that the Ferris wheel is very clearly themed to Wario. What, with the giant yellow W and the Wario mustache right behind it, which likely means this ride's called the Wario Wheel. So bonus points for alliteration, Wario. And did you notice half the gondolas are actually themed to Wario's trademark purple overalls, with just a hint of his yellow shirt around them? Now as for the other half, they oddly seem to be themed to Mario's overalls. Oh, and like with the vertical curve, the entire thing appears to be supported by those famous green pipes. Then there are the boats that we can see along the shoreline, including Mario, Yoshi, and Wario ones. But that's not the first we've seen of those boats, as they also appeared in the village course that we played at E3. And speaking of things that appear in other courses, did you notice all the garbage cans around the park have a water park sign on them? Well, if that sounds familiar, it's because we first saw an ad for this very same water park in Sunshine Airport that we pointed out in our last analysis. So that's another mystery solved. And yet another cool touch. Oh, and we're guessing that crown-looking thing beneath it is a park's logo, seeing as it's plastered all over the place, such as on banners and even that underwater ride. Although there is one more possibility. Because that logo does sort of resemble a crown, albeit an oddly shaped one, it could mean that this track is from the game's Special Cup, as a crown has historically been used as its icon. Huh, you think we're done? Of course we're not done. Like, did you notice there appears to be a wooden coaster in the background here? And we actually get a better look at it in this screenshot. And we can see that it appears to be called Waluigi's Seabed. Well, either that, or maybe it's the name of the general area. It does seem to be a bit of an odd name for a coaster after all. Finally, did you notice all the balloons in the background? Well, if we go back to that Waluigi scene again, we can see they're actually emerging from this warp pipe. Okay, and that's everything we know about all the new tracks in the trailer. Or is it? Well, as it turns out, there is actually one more scene that doesn't fit in with any of the others. This one, which shows an underwater area complete with Cheep Cheeps, real ones, and scuba diving toads in the background. But check this out, if you freeze the scene just before it ends, we can see some odd looking mountains in the background. And those mountains match up perfectly to the ones in a single screenshot released from Nintendo, where we can see that they're not just any mountains, but they're dolphin-shaped ones. 3 of them to be exact. And in fact, we can even see 3 actual dolphins swimming around in this picture too. Which means we're probably looking at Dolphin Shoals, which as we pointed out before is listed as a destination in Sunshine Airport. And not only that, but we also correctly predicted in our last analysis that the dolphins featured here would actually be based on the ones of Super Mario World. But are they just a cool detail, or will they actually interact with the racers in some way? Now this image appears as if it may take place immediately following the scene shown in the trailer, given that the general perspective appears to be the same. And we can see a jump just ahead that apparently leads through a giant ring in the water, though we have no idea what that ring might actually be for. Is it like a hoop that dolphins jump through in a stunt show? Okay, and now that's everything we can dig up on the new courses, but there's still 4 returning ones left to talk about. Now since we already know how these courses will largely play based on past games, I'm only going to point out the main differences. But if you're hungry for more, make sure to stay tuned for our upcoming head-to-head comparison video that put the new retro tracks against their original versions. So let's start things off with perhaps the most different track of them all, being Mario Circuit from Mario Kart Super Circuit. Now the thing with any track from Super Circuit was that they were all entirely flat due to technical limitations, as you can see in this footage from the original game. So it's no surprise that that's still mostly the case here, but only just mostly, because as you can see, a giant U-shaped section of it is now raised at a 45-degree angle and turned into an anti-gravity section. And to get to it, you'll first have to take a newly installed jump. But you'll also find that it terminates on the other end with another jump, and this time we're guessing it turns into a flying section. Now the view at the top of the raised track provides an excellent view of the course, and we can see that it matches that of the original game almost perfectly, including the split track at the finish line. Hell, you can even see giant trees in the background, with Super Mario World style mountains behind them, just like in the original game. But there are still a few other things to note here. First of all, if you freeze this clip right here, we can see the addition of an oil slick marked with cones, which we're guessing will cause you to spin out like in past games. And beyond that, there's a surprising amount of detail put into the racetrack itself, such as the stacks of tires now found throughout. Then there are the ads and billboards in the background, like the one for 1UP Fuel here, and another for Mario Motors here, which is actually an ad for a business that appears in the Mario Circuit level that we saw back at E3. And do you remember those oil cans visible here that we pointed out before? Well, they appear in the retro Mario Circuit as well, inside this newly built hut. And right next to that hut is another banner for Fuzzy Battery, and fittingly enough, it even has a fuzzy enemy as its mascot. And in this clip, we can see even more ad banners, including one for Chain Chomp, another featuring a red shell, and a few others we can't quite make out. But perhaps the coolest details involve that race section of track again. For one, we can see that it's not floating for no reason at all, but it's actually being supported by a set of giant car jacks, which is fitting for a course seemingly sponsored by Mario Motors. And check this out. If we zoom in on the now revealed hole in the ground, we can see that the ground actually consists of bricks in the style of that of the original Super Mario Bros. Game. And that's it for Mario Circuit, so we think it's time to take a look at Tock Clock from Mario Kart DS. Now perhaps the biggest thing to note about this course is just how much better it looks. What used to be a large but empty room is now filled to the brim with gears and other moving parts in the background. But gameplay-wise, the track, like the others, seems pretty close to the original game, even including the 2 conveyor belts that move in opposite directions just before the finish line. But there have been some noteworthy changes, such as in this scene where Luigi's racing across the face of a giant clock. First up, the boost pads are now wider, rather than the longer ones of the original game. Then check this out. Luigi appears to drive right over what we think is a clock hand, which would have caused him to spin out in the original game. Though upon closer inspection, it looks like Luigi may have actually jumped over it instead, which is still something that was impossible in the original game. So it could mean that the clock hands are still a major but avoidable obstacle. Moving on, in this scene, we can see the clock pendulum at what appears to be in the same place as in Mario Kart DS. But if we move forward a bit, we can see a second one has been added here just around the corner. And they've apparently moved the item boxes from before the first one to just before the second. Now in the original game, when you ran into a pendulum, it would stop you dead in your tracks. But this time, if you freeze the clip at the very end, we can see it actually gets pushed forward as someone runs into it, which might suggest that there'll be a bit less of a hazard this time, merely slowing you down instead of stopping you completely. Although it could be due to the fact that the character was invincible, although this had no effect in the original game. Also, there's now a drop-off here this time too, which we suspect will be followed by several more, as opposed to the gradual downhill ramp featured in the original game. And that's it for the gameplay, but there are a few other cosmetic changes I wanted to note, such as the fact that the starting line is actually located inside a giant alarm clock, which you can see ringing here. Then there's the fact that we can see Roman numerals in the background of this scene, which appear to replace the Arabic numerals of the original game. Oh, and toads can be found along the sidelines too. Finally, if we take a look at the face of the pendulums, we can see they not only say Mario Kart on them, but they also display an image of a lightning bolt, which is the logo usually used for the retro lightning cup, which likely means that's where we can expect to find Tock Clock this time around. Alrighty, and that's it for TikTok Clock. So let's swing on over to Mario Kart 7's DK Jungle. And once again, we can see it's remarkably faithful to the original course, right down to the return of the Tiki and DK barrel obstacles. And if we look close in this scene, we can even see the frogs are back too. Although while we're here, it does seem that they've taken out the thick mud that would originally slow you down in this spot. Now, if we head to the Golden Temple part of the course, we can start to see some pretty big changes. First is the fact that there's now a wall when you enter, preventing you from driving off the track. But after you turn, you'll find the gentle inclines of the original game have been replaced with a brief anti-gravity section that's much steeper. And there's now a drop-off just before the Golden Banana. And speaking of the Golden Banana, not only does it look a lot more, well, golden, but it now spins too. And they've also added some torches to liven up the place, as well as decorative banana bunches that line the entrance and exit. Alright, we're through with you, DK Jungle, so let's roll on over to Grumble Volcano, which first appeared in Mario Kart Wii. And like the others, it appears quite similar to before, complete with the large bricks and question blocks visible in the background. And as we can see, the course will still give away in later laps, and apparently in the exact same manner too. But there are a couple of things to note here. First, they've added torches to the raceway. Next, the billboard just right of the tunnel has been replaced with an ad for something Bullet Bill related. But more impressively, they've also added a stream of lava flowing down the mountainside, and you can even see that illuminates the nearby area. Following all that, we get an inside look at the tunnel, where we can see not much has changed, besides the massively improved visuals of course. And nowhere is this better illustrated than by the erupting volcano in the background, which now looks far more visually impressive, with far better lighting effects, lava flowing down the sides, and it even emits a shockwave with each eruption. But there is something new here too, a jump pad that leads into a flying section. Finally, we have this final scene, which once again shows little else has changed, though we can see the fiery debris will still be a thing. Okay, and that finally covers it for all 8 courses shown off. So between everything we've now seen in Mario Kart 8, that means we now know of 12 new tracks and 7 retro ones returning in total. Which suggests that if it sticks to the same track count as every past Mario Kart game besides the original and Super Circuit, that means there are still 4 new ones and 9 retro ones left to be shown. And speaking of the retro tracks, if they split them up among the Mario Kart series as evenly as possible, that means we should expect to see 2 courses from every game, with a couple getting 3. But since we've already seen 3 tracks in Mario Kart 7, it seems safe to assume that we won't see any more from that game. And oddly, the original Super Mario Kart's the odd game out in that we haven't seen a single track from it yet. Okay, I promise I'm finally done talking about the tracks, because the trailer also gives us a better idea of how items will work this time around too. Now we already pointed out in our last analysis that characters will actually physically hold on to their items this time around, but we wondered how that would work with items that come in threes, like triple shells. Well, now we have our answer, as we can see throughout the trailer that they'll orbit your cart just like in past games. But this time it applies to triple mushrooms too, which is something we haven't seen before. And when you go to use an item, like a Koopa shell, your character will actually pick it up before throwing it, which is a cool touch. And on top of all of this, if we look back at the last trailer, there's a few frames where we can see Mario dragging a single Koopa shell behind him like a shield. Again, like past games. Now, unfortunately, the trailer even shoots down one of our theories that you might be able to steal items again, a la Double Dash, by ramming into other characters while using a mushroom, which is exactly what we see Wario here do to Baby Mario, and yet Baby Mario has no trouble holding onto his item. So what this all means is that it appears items behave exactly as they have in every Mario Kart game since Double Dash, which means the fact that your character can now be seen holding them is mostly, if not entirely, cosmetic. Essentially, all the developers have done is relocate the item box to your character's hands, which at the very least is a cool touch and might result in a less cluttered HUD, although we do think this could result in one small tweak. In past Mario Kart games, items that orbited your cart could also be run into by other racers, meaning someone could be taken out by a Koopa shell simply by getting too close. So we can't help but wonder this might apply to the triple mushrooms too, only this time giving your opponent a speed boost. And there's actually a precedent for this. You see, in Mario Kart 7, the Lucky 7 item would cause 7 different items to appear and orbit your cart, including a mushroom and a star, both of which, if touched by an opponent, would grant them the power instead. So we think there's a strong chance it could work the same way for triple mushrooms this time too. And it would actually change the way the game's played a bit, forcing you to be a little bit more careful with how close you drive to other opponents. Now while we're on the topic of items, the latest batch of artwork released from Nintendo confirms 3 more returning items that we haven't yet seen before in action: the Lightning Bolt, Blue Shell, and Bullet Bill. But interestingly, we still haven't seen a single new item, so it's clear the game's still hiding some surprises. And speaking of surprises, perhaps the biggest news of the trailer is the announcement that, for the first time ever, the Koopalings will actually be playable. Yep, that means Larry, Wendy, Ludwig, Morton Jr., Iggy, Lemmy, and Roy. Which is awesome! But beyond that, this brings Mario Kart 8's character roster up to 24, which is the second highest amount of characters to ever appear in a Mario Kart game, being only 2 behind Mario Kart Wii's 26. And since we still have some time to go until the game's release, we're pretty sure all the characters haven't been announced yet, which could mean Mario Kart 8's roster will be record-breaking. After all, we're still missing Mii, who's appeared in the last 2 Mario Kart games, as well as Bowser Jr., who's appeared in both of the previous 2 console games. And that's on top of all the characters we've theorized may appear as well. Moving on, the new trailer also shows off a few new vehicles. Among the more interesting ones are the Wiggler Kart, whose nose doubles as a vehicle's grill, Bowser's Airship, Mario's Jet Engine Bike, where you can even see the turbine spinning inside, and Daisy shows off a purple car that has a cat tail attached to it. Is this a reference to the cat power-up from Super Mario 3D World? Now, in a previous analysis, we pointed out that the motorcycle Rosalina was riding had all kinds of decals on it. And that seems to be even more the case with the vehicles here. Take Luigi's kart for example, which has decals for Propeller Tow Transport, Galaxy Airline, as well as 1UP Racing. But we can't help but wonder if these are set in stone, or maybe if you'll be able to customize your ride with these decals. After all, Mario Kart DS did let you create your own vehicle emblem, so it would be cool to see something along those lines return here as well. Okay, we're just about done here, but there's still a few final things I wanted to point out, like some more of the cool little graphical touches that can be found throughout the game, such as how there's now a line of fire left behind any time you boost, like by using a mushroom. Then there are the tires, which seem to grow visibly dirty from driving along dirt surfaces. And then there's the fact whenever you emerge from underwater, water droplets remain on the screen. Oh, and check out DK here, who now has a fancy fur effect similar to his portrayal in Tropical Freeze. Now speaking of graphical touches, the trailer opens up with a scene that's pretty unusual. While the footage in the background of the city track appears to be fairly typical of how races begin in Mario Kart games, showing off different parts of the course, that equalizer overlay is anything but. And it got us thinking, what exactly is it for? And we think we may have the answer. Do you remember how this course had ads for Mario Kart TV all over the place? Well, we think every scene recorded for these latest trailers might actually all be captured from this Mario Kart TV mode. It certainly would explain the highly dynamic camera angles and the slow motion effects during key moments, like when performing a stunt or ramming into an opponent. And we think the unusual intro might actually be how every race starts in this mode, replacing the typical 3-second countdown, which we can actually still hear in this scene. So if we're right, it could mean every track might have its own unique overlay, and we think that's pretty cool. And with that, we're done covering everything we could dig up from the latest Mario Kart 8 trailer. As always, let us know if we missed anything by posting in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You'll find links to them in the description below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more on Mario Kart 8 and other things gaming too.